Welcome to the captivating realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Enjoy the journey.
The night was unnaturally quiet, a stillness that Marcus hadn't experienced in quite some time. His secluded cabin in the woods served as the perfect retreat, far removed from the tumult of urban life. The air was imbued with the scent of pine and damp earth, the chill of autumn creeping into his bones as he tended to the fire in the hearth. A man who sought solitude, he relished the silence broken only by the crackling flames and the distant howling of the wind through the trees. Yet tonight, an unsettling sensation lingered at the back of his mind, an anxiety he couldn't quite shake. Maybe it's just the isolation getting to me, Marcus pondered, but it felt deeper than that. It felt as if something was observing him, something unknown. Something lurking just outside. He rubbed his temples, standing up from his chair, his hand running through his tousled dark hair. With a stretch, he moved toward the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass as he peered into the darkness. The night was still, not a rustle, not a whisper, only the eerie quiet, and then he spotted it, a faint shimmer in the air, a distortion resembling heat rising from pavement. Yet this was no mirage, it was something else, something otherworldly. His heart raced as the shimmer expanded, drawing nearer until the vague outline of a figure emerged, tall and slender, moving with a fluidity that felt off. Marcus staggered back, his pulse thundering in his ears. "What on earth is that?" he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. Before he could react, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, the doors slamming open with a gust of frigid air. The figure stepped inside, and Marcus's breath caught in his chest. She appeared to be a woman, or at least she looked that way. Her skin glowed with an ethereal radiance, a pale blue hue that sparkled in the flickering firelight. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, glowing with an unsettling white luminescence, locking onto him with a hunger that sent chills through him. She wore a form-fitting suit that clung to her tall, willowy form, the material shimmering like liquid metal. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, creating a stark contrast against her peculiar skin tone. Every step she took was deliberate, as if savoring the moment, her gaze never straying from his. Marcus retreated, his mind racing. This can't be real. I must be dreaming. The woman, or creature, smiled, her lips curling in a way that was both seductive and menacing. "Human," she purred, her voice melodic yet laced with danger. "I have been searching for you." His throat went dry as he struggled to find words. Every instinct told him to flee, but his legs felt like lead, frozen in place by her penetrating gaze. She approached, her slender fingers brushing against his chest. The contact was electric, a surge of energy coursing through him, leaving him breathless. He stumbled backward, but she followed, her fingers tracing the outline of his jaw. "I can sense your fear and confusion," she whispered, her eyes narrowing with amusement. "It's intoxicating." At last, he found his voice, his mind scrambling for some semblance of clarity. "Who? What are you?" The woman's smile widened, her eyes shining with a blend of predatory desire and intrigue. "I am not from your world, human," she stated, her voice dripping with allure. "But you are precisely what I need." Marcus's heart raced as her words sank in. "Need? What do you mean?" She tilted her head, studying him as if he were an intriguing puzzle. "You see, human males possess something unique, a quality that my kind requires. And I have chosen you." Her gaze dropped lower, her smile turning wicked. "You have a certain weapon." Marcus felt a chill creep up his spine. He swallowed hard, struggling to grasp what she was implying. "Weapon? I don't understand." The woman moved closer, her breath warm against his neck as she whispered in his ear, "Between your legs, human, it's a weapon. One that I need, but it causes pain. I'll have to train you to wield it properly." His mind went blank, heat flooding his face as her words registered. Every fiber of his being screamed to escape, but he was trapped, paralyzed by her strange allure. there was something terrifyingly magnetic about her presence, something that made him feel utterly helpless. Ensnared in a web he couldn't break free from. He took a shaky step back, his heart racing. "I don't know what you think you're talking about, but you need to leave now." The woman laughed, a soft, chilling sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "Oh, human," she purred, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "You have no idea what you're capable of, but don't worry. I'll show you." With a flick of her wrist, the door slammed shut behind her, rattling the cabin's walls. Marcus's chest tightened, the air thick with tension as this alien creature advanced toward him with predatory grace. Every step she took sent his mind into a spiral, each movement deliberate and calculated, as if she were relishing in his powerlessness. The firelight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room as she reached out again, her fingers grazing his arm. "You can feel it, can't you?" she whispered, her voice low and hypnotic. "The connection between us, it's unavoidable." Marcus clenched his fists, struggling to regain control of the situation. "I don't know who or what you are, but you need to go." "I'm not." She interrupted him with a soft laugh, her eyes glowing brighter as she leaned in, her breath brushing against his skin. "Oh, human, you have no idea what you are capable of, but don't worry. I will teach you." In an instant, her touch changed from gentle to assertive, her grip tightening around his arm. Marcus gasped as a wave of warmth surged through him. An intense feeling that left him breathless. His knees buckled, and he fell to the floor, the world spinning as her presence enveloped him. The last thing he saw before everything went black was her glowing eyes fixed on him, filled with a mix of hunger and satisfaction. The cabin fell into a deafening silence, interrupted only by the faint crackle of the dying fire. And then, there was nothing. Marcus stirred, consciousness returning slowly, like a swimmer fighting to surface from a deep, dark lake. His eyelids felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled its hold on him, and his entire body ached with a dull throb. The warmth of the fire had vanished, replaced by a cold, sterile chill that seeped into his bones. He blinked hard, trying to focus, his vision swimming as the dim overhead light flickered and buzzed. This wasn't his cabin. The comforting wooden walls and the familiar scent of pine had been replaced by something alien. The walls around him glimmered with a metallic sheen, smooth and seamless, reminiscent of a futuristic machine. He lay on a strange bed, hard and cold, yet it molded to the contours of his body. It hummed softly as if alive. Marcus bolted upright, breath catching in his throat. What the hell? His heart raced as he scanned the room, panic rising within him. He wasn't alone. She was there, standing in the corner, observing him with those unsettling glowing eyes. Her tall, slender figure cast a long shadow across the room, her silver hair glistening under the dim lights. The soft hum of machinery surrounding him synced with the steady rhythm of his own fear. "Welcome back, human," she said, her voice smooth as silk, yet tinged with something far more sinister. A small, amused smile played at the corners of her lips as she stepped closer. "You took longer to wake than I expected. Your body's adjustment to our environment is slower than anticipated." A chill raced up his spine, settling in the pit of his stomach. "Your ship." His mind spun, trying to grasp the reality of her words. "I'm not on Earth anymore." The thought sent a wave of cold dread through him. The walls felt as though they were closing in, the air itself foreign and thin. The woman moved closer, her eyes narrowing as she examined him like a scientist studying a specimen. "You humans are so fragile," she said, almost teasingly. "So easy to break. But you're stronger than most." He pushed himself off the bed, legs unsteady as they touched the cold metallic floor. His muscles protested, but he forced himself to stand. "What do you want from me?" he growled, attempting to mask the tremor in his voice. "You took me from my home. Let me go." A laugh escaped her lips, a sound both delightful and cruel. "Let you go? Oh, Marcus, you misunderstand. I've only just begun to explore the depths of what you have to offer. Her words coiled around him like a serpent, tightening with every beat of his heart. He clenched his fists, battling against the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. I won't be your experiment. Whatever you want, you won't get it from me. She stepped closer, her eyes glinting with mischief. You'll see. Resistance is futile. This is only the beginning. Before he could reply, she waved her hand, and the room transformed around him. The walls faded into a blur, replaced by a vivid scene, an expansive alien landscape stretching out before him, filled with towering trees that glowed softly and strange creatures flitting between them. Welcome to my world, she said, her voice echoing with an unsettling mix of pride and darkness. Marcus's heart raced as the reality of his situation crashed over him. He was trapped in a world far removed from everything he knew, caught in the web of a creature whose intentions remained shrouded in shadows. As he faced her, the last remnants of hope began to slip away, replaced by a cold, hard realization: he was utterly at her mercy. My survival and that of my kind. Marcus shook his head, his heart racing with every word she uttered. You must be joking, he muttered, stepping back from her. I'm not some subject for you to experiment on. Her smile faltered momentarily, and a shadow flickered in her eyes. She advanced toward him with sharp, deliberate movements, like a predator stalking its prey. You don't have a choice, human. You will comply, she said, her words cut short by a strange device on her wrist that began to blink, emitting a series of rapid beeps. She glanced down, her expression hardening. Not now, she murmured under her breath, eyes narrowing as she scanned the data flashing across the device. Without a word, she pivoted and strode toward the metallic door on the far side of the room. It slid open with a soft hiss, and she vanished through it, leaving Marcus alone in the sudden oppressive silence. The door sealed behind her, and he wasted no time. His mind shifted into high gear. I have to escape, he thought, his pulse pounding in his ears. His gaze darted around the room, searching for any means of escape, a vent, a panel, anything. The walls were smooth and featureless, punctuated only by a few glowing lines that pulsed faintly. There were no visible buttons or controls, no windows, nothing that seemed familiar. He approached the door she had exited, his hands trembling as he reached for the cool metal. There was no handle, no obvious mechanism to open it. He cursed under his breath, slamming his fist against the wall in frustration. He needed to think, he had to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help him now. Suddenly, a sharp sound shattered the silence, resembling steam hissing from a pressurized source. He turned around, eyes widening as a small panel on the far side of the room slid open. From it emerged a sleek cylindrical drone, hovering silently in the air. Its metallic surface gleamed under the dim light as it floated toward him, its round, glowing eyes scanning him with unnerving intensity. Stay back! Marcus shouted, his voice trembling. He grabbed the nearest object, a small metallic tray from a nearby counter, and held it up as a makeshift shield. I don't know what you are, but stay away from me. The drone halted, its eye flickering as it processed his words. Then, without warning, it emitted a soft high-pitched tone. A beam of light shot from its center, scanning his body from head to toe. Marcus gasped as the beam passed over him, a strange tingling sensation crawling across his skin. For a brief moment, he felt weightless, his body vibrating with an unfamiliar energy. The sensation was almost unbearable, like thousands of tiny needles pricking his skin simultaneously. And then, just as suddenly, the light vanished. The drone emitted a soft beep and retreated back into its panel, which sealed shut behind it. Marcus stood frozen, his body trembling from the encounter. What the hell was that? He rubbed his arms, trying to shake off the lingering sensation, but his mind raced again. He couldn't remain here, whatever they were planning, he needed to escape. His eyes scanned the room once more, searching for anything that might aid his escape. The door hissed open behind him, and Marcus spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. The alien woman stepped back into the room, her eyes glowing with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. "Did you miss me, human?" she asked, her voice dripping with amusement. Marcus tensed, fists clenched as her presence filled the room again. His mind screamed at him to flee. But he knew there was nowhere to go, not yet. "Let's continue our little experiment, shall we?" She purred, stepping closer, her smile sharp and predatory. Marcus's heart raced as the door sealed behind her with a menacing hiss, trapping him in the cold metallic room with her. His heart raced as her eyes locked onto him, glowing, unblinking orbs that seemed to see right through him, stripping away his defenses. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something terrifying in that beauty, something inhuman and untouchable, a predator behind a facade of perfection. Now, where were we? She purred, her voice slipping through the air like velvet. Though her smile was sharp and predatory. She circled him slowly, her tall, lithe form casting long shadows in the sterile, dimly lit room. "Ah, yes, your role in my plan." Marcus's hands balled into fists, sweat slicking his palms. He needed to maintain his composure to find some leverage. His thoughts were a jumbled mess, tangled in confusion and fear. "What does she want from me?" Her voice cut through his internal chaos, pulling him back to the present. "You're not like the others I've harvested." Her tone was casual, as if discussing the weather. "There's a strength in you, a resistance. It's intriguing." She paused in front of him, her eyes narrowing. "I'm not accustomed to being denied." "Human." Marcus swallowed hard. The tension in the air thickening. "I'm not your toy," he growled, though his voice betrayed the fear simmering just beneath the surface. She laughed, a low, musical sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "Oh, but you are. You just don't realize it yet." Her hand reached out, and before Marcus could react, her fingers brushed his cheek, cold, unnervingly smooth, and carrying a slight electric charge that made his skin tingle. He jerked back, but the sensation lingered, a reminder of her power. His body tensed, muscles coiling as if preparing for a fight, but something held him back. She was more than she seemed, he could sense it. This was no ordinary woman, no simple adversary. She moved like a panther, her every step measured, deliberate, calculated. She was toying with him, relishing in his fear. "I don't know what you think you'll gain from this," Marcus said through gritted teeth, "but I'm not helping you." Her eyes gleamed, and for a moment, she didn't move. She simply stared at him, and he felt the weight of that gaze pressing down on him physically. "You misunderstand, Marcus. This isn't about what I want, it's about what you need." She took another step closer, her presence suffocating. "I don't need anything from you," he spat, but even as he said it, the words felt hollow. His pulse quickened, a strange mix of fear and something more primal coiling deep within him. "Oh, but you do," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo. "You may not realize it yet, but your body does. You've already begun to change, haven't you? That tingling sensation you felt earlier? That was just the beginning." Marcus's eyes widened, and he instinctively touched his arm where the drone's beam had passed over him. The sensation had faded, but now, with her words, it surged back, an unsettling heat beneath his skin, a faint buzzing in his veins. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it was impossible to ignore. His heart raced in his chest, and his breath quickened. "What did you do to me?" His voice wavered, panic creeping in as he took a step back, trying to create distance. Her smile widened as she leaned in closer, her breath cool against his skin. "Your body is adapting, Marcus. My species, well, we require certain adjustments to your physiology to ensure compatibility. I've ensured the process is painless. Mostly." Marcus felt a wave of nausea wash over him, his mind racing to comprehend her words. But it was too much. The room felt as if it were closing in, the walls suffocating, the air too thin. Compatibility adjustments. What the hell does she mean? You're lying, he said, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. You can't just change someone like that. Her eyes glittered with amusement as she took another step toward him. Oh, but I can. And I have. She leaned in even closer, her breath chilling against his skin. You see, Marcus, you're already part of something far greater than you could ever comprehend. Your body is evolving, adapting to my needs. He backed away, but there was nowhere to escape. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs felt heavy, sluggish, as if trapped in some kind of nightmare. You can't just use me like this, he muttered, though the desperation in his voice was unmistakable. I already have, she said softly, almost sympathetically. But don't worry, Marcus. You'll come to appreciate your role soon enough. In fact, I think you're starting to enjoy it. Her hand reached out again, brushing against his chest. And he flinched at the contact, but something stirred inside him, a heat that was strangely welcome. No. Marcus growled, shaking his head violently, as if trying to dispel the fog clouding his mind. He stepped back, but every movement felt like pushing against a rising tide. You have no idea what you're doing, he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. I'm not yours to play with. She chuckled softly, her laughter echoing in the sterile space. You say that now, but deep down, I sense a different truth. You crave this, Marcus. You're more like me than you realize. The weight of her gaze pressed down harder on him, suffocating him. You're wrong, he spat, though the conviction was fading. And a nagging voice whispered that she might be right. We're nothing alike. She stepped even closer, invading his personal space, her presence overwhelming. Aren't we? She asked, her voice low and sultry. The way she looked at him made his heart race, igniting a storm of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, and an undeniable pull toward her. Stop it, he said, trying to sound assertive, but his voice cracked. Just stop. The smile on her lips widened, a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. You're fighting it, but it's pointless. You'll submit eventually, Marcus. They all do. The walls around him felt like they were closing in, the weight of her gaze pressing down harder, suffocating him. This can't be happening, he thought. I'm losing myself. Come, let's get started, she said, taking another step closer. You have so much to learn, and I have all the time in the world to teach you. With that, she extended her hand, inviting him into her world, an alien landscape filled with unknown horrors and undeniable allure. Marcus hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. The conflict within him was a storm, raging against the calm facade she wore. He could feel the gravity of her presence, pulling him closer, and it terrified him. I won't give in, he whispered, but even as he spoke, he felt the tentative threads of his resolve beginning to unravel, the edges of his will fraying like a worn rope. Your body will betray you. Her voice turned cold as she stepped closer, her intensity suddenly palpable. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. You are mine. Before Marcus could react, she was upon him, her body pressing against his in a way that sent shockwaves of sensation through his nerves. Her hands gripped his arms with surprising strength, pinning him in place. He struggled, but his limbs felt heavy and sluggish, as if he no longer owned his body. The heat between them grew, electric and suffocating, every nerve in Marcus's body screaming with a blend of pain and pleasure. His mind was ensnared in a dizzying whirl of sensations, feeling a foreign energy within him responding to her touch, intensifying the strange feelings coursing through him. Her eyes bore into his, and for a moment, he glimpsed something raw and primal lurking beneath her cold, calculated exterior, hunger and desperation. She needed him, but not just in the way she expressed, there was something deeper, something unsaid. You are not like the others, she whispered, her breath hot against his neck. You're different, stronger. You can handle this. Handle me. Her grip tightened, and Marcus gasped as the pressure built, the pain and heat merging into a volatile cocktail of sensations that threatened to overwhelm him. His body trembled, caught between resistance and surrender. He didn't want this, he didn't want to be a pawn in her twisted experiment. Yet, the more she touched him, the more his body responded, betraying him in ways he couldn't control. "Stop," he gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stop this." Her lips brushed against his ear, and her voice was a whisper of silk and danger. "You'll thank me soon enough." With a final surge of overwhelming energy, she pulled away from him, leaving Marcus standing there, breathless and trembling. His skin burned with the aftershocks of her touch, and his mind was a chaotic mess of conflicting emotions. She stepped back, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she observed him. "We're not done yet, Marcus," she said softly, her voice dripping with promise. "This is just the beginning." Marcus stood there, his heart racing in his chest, his mind urging him to run, to fight, to do anything. But his body was frozen, paralyzed by the strange sensations surging through him. He could feel it now, deep within, something was changing, something inside him awakening that he didn't comprehend. As the alien woman turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the cold metallic room, Marcus realized one undeniable truth: he was no longer in control. Standing alone, the quiet of the room pressed in around him like a physical force. His legs trembled, his skin still tingling from the alien woman's touch. Every part of him felt altered, as if his very biology had begun to shift in response to her. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, and he could feel the weight of her presence lingering even after she left. His thoughts raced with frantic questions. What is happening to me? What is she doing? He instinctively reached for the spot on his arm where the tingling had begun, heat now coursing through his veins like wildfire. He sensed something stirring deep inside him, something unnatural that wasn't him. "I have to get out of here," panic clawed at the edges of his mind, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. His muscles twitched, a strange energy pulsing just beneath the surface of his skin, as if he were on the verge of something dangerous, something uncontrollable. A hiss filled the air as the door slid open again. And his pulse quickened as she stepped back into the room, her presence instantly suffocating. She moved with predatory grace, her tall figure gliding over the cold floor, the soft sound of her footsteps echoing in the metallic silence. Her eyes, glowing orbs of blue, locked onto him, and Marcus felt an instinctual shudder run through his body. "You're changing faster than I expected," she said, her voice smooth yet tinged with something darker, satisfaction or perhaps impatience. "I knew you would be different, stronger." He gritted his teeth, his mind screaming at him to maintain control, to fight whatever was happening to him. "I'm not going to be your experiment," he growled. His voice low but trembling with barely contained anger. His hands flexed at his sides, a small act of defiance against the overwhelming fear. Her gaze flickered with amusement as she tilted her head, studying him. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about me, it's about you, Marcus, about what you're becoming." She stepped closer, her long fingers brushing lightly over his arm, sending a surge of heat through his body. He flinched, but she didn't pull away. "What the hell did you do to me?" His voice wavered, anger rising above the fear. "I didn't ask for this." "You didn't need to ask," she interrupted, her voice soft yet filled with certainty. "Your body knows what it needs. It's already begun to respond. You're evolving, Marcus, becoming something more than human." His breath hitched as the weight of her words sank in, "more than human." The phrase echoed in his mind, twisting into a dark promise. He could feel it now, the changes she spoke of, subtle, creeping sensations beneath his skin, shifting and growing stronger with each passing moment. Her hand slid up his chest, her touch leaving a trail of heat that seemed to sink into his flesh. "You've always been different, haven't you?" she murmured, her voice a gentle hum that sent shivers down his spine. "Something about you drew me here to this moment. You and I, we were meant to be." "Meant to be?" Marcus spat, his anger boiling over. "I'm not some tool for you to use. I'm not your plaything." He shoved her away, or at least tried to, but his muscles strained as if his body was no longer under his control. His arms felt sluggish, unresponsive. Her eyes gleamed as she watched him struggle. "You don't realize it yet," she said, her voice barely a whisper now, enough to send chills down his spine, "but you will." Before Marcus could respond, she moved with lightning speed, faster than any human should be capable of, her hand catching his wrist and pulling him toward her. Her face was mere inches from his, her breath a cool whisper against his skin. "Your mind, Marcus," she said, her voice eerily calm. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him as he instinctively yanked his arm away, stumbling backward in a desperate bid to distance himself. "No," he declared, his voice trembling yet resolute. "I'm not yours. I will never belong to you." A slow, predatory smile spread across her lips, sending another wave of dread rippling through him. "We'll see about that," she replied ominously. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, she lunged at him again, her hands gripping his shoulders with a strength that caught him off guard. Their bodies were pressed together in a way that ignited every nerve in his body, flooding him with an intoxicating mix of fear and desire. The heat radiating between them was unbearable, electric, and deep within him, something primal stirred, a raw instinct that terrified him to his core. He struggled against the overwhelming pull, trying to push her away, but his strength was fading. His mind became clouded, thoughts tangled in the whirlwind of sensations that assaulted him. The oppressive heat, the weight of her presence, and the intensity of their connection overwhelmed him. Then, her lips brushed his ear, her voice a sultry, dangerous whisper. "You're already mine, Marcus. You just haven't realized it yet." His heart raced, pounding against his ribcage. And his breath came in ragged gasps as he sensed a profound transformation within himself. He felt the shift, an undeniable change stirring deep inside. His muscles tightened, his skin prickling with an unfamiliar energy that felt both alien and alluring. It wasn't just a surge of strength, it was hers, flowing through him, reshaping him in ways he couldn't fully grasp. "No," he whispered, pleading more with himself than with her. "I won't let you do this." Yet as he uttered those words, he felt the last remnants of his control slipping away. Her fingers glided down his chest, and he gasped as a wave of heat surged through him. It wasn't quite pain, but it was intense and overwhelming. As if every nerve in his body had ignited. His vision began to blur, thoughts scattering like autumn leaves caught in a gust. "Don't resist it," she murmured, her voice low and soothing, wrapping around him like a soft embrace. "This is your destiny, what you were meant for." Suddenly, Marcus's knees gave way, and he sank to the floor, the chill of the surface a stark reminder of his predicament. He gasped for air, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts as he recognized the gravity of his situation. The change was upon him, nearing its climax. His body felt foreign, an entity that no longer belonged to him. The alien woman knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his cheek. A mix of comfort and danger in her touch. "It's okay, Marcus," she whispered reassuringly. "You're almost there." Tears filled his eyes as he fought to maintain his sense of identity, but it was a futile struggle. His body was betraying him, succumbing to the power she had unleashed. He felt the transformation coursing through him, resonating in his bones and blood, a complete surrender to her will. "Please," he pleaded, his voice barely audible, as if he could summon enough strength to resist. "Please stop." But she only smiled, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "It's too late for that." His vision faded, the room spinning in a disorienting whirl. His breath became shallow, and his body shook under the force of the change. He could feel it clearly now, his muscles shifting, his skin tingling with the strange energy that had taken hold of him, reshaping him into something entirely different. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The intense heat dissipated, the weight lifting from his chest. Marcus collapsed onto the cold floor, gasping for breath, his body weak and trembling. His mind was a chaotic blur, thoughts disjointed and confusing, leaving him feeling utterly lost. The alien woman loomed over him, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and authority. "Welcome to your new reality, Marcus," she announced, her tone dripping with mockery. He lacked the strength to respond, his body was drained. And his mind was a tangled web of fear and confusion. He could sense the undeniable truth of his transformation, feeling it in every part of him. But what had he become? As darkness began to envelop him, he heard her voice one last time, soft yet menacing, echoing in the void, "You belong to me, Marcus, and there's no escaping that." With those chilling words, the world faded into darkness. Marcus drifted in the darkness, his mind a swirling tempest of confusion and fear. He felt as if he were suspended between realities, a place where nothing made sense. But slowly, like the soft glow of dawn breaking through the night, awareness began to seep back into him. The coldness of the floor pressed against his skin, grounding him. As he blinked, the darkness faded, and he found himself in a dimly lit room, the alien woman now standing before him, her silhouette framed by shadows. "Welcome back," she said, her voice smooth and seductive, sending a shiver down his spine. Her eyes sparkled with an otherworldly light, a hint of amusement dancing within them. "I hope you're feeling more yourself. What have you done to me?" Marcus croaked, his voice hoarse. Panic clawed at his throat as he struggled to sit up, bracing himself against the wall. The room was small and unadorned, with cold, metallic walls that felt alive with energy, pulsating softly in rhythm with his racing heart. "You've been reborn," she replied, stepping closer, her presence almost intoxicating. "I've unlocked your true potential, Marcus. You are now something greater than you ever imagined. Embrace it." "Greater? This feels like a nightmare," he said, his voice tinged with defiance. "I didn't ask for this." She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills through him. "No one ever does. But destiny has its own plans. And you are a key player in a much larger game." Her expression shifted, becoming more serious. "There are forces at work that you cannot comprehend yet. They are hunting for you, Marcus. You are vital to their schemes." "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to process her words, struggling to piece together the fragments of his altered reality. "Who's hunting me? Why?" She regarded him with a mixture of pity and admiration. "You were chosen for a reason. Your potential is unique, a fusion of both human and something far more powerful. The ones who seek you wish to control that power. They will stop at nothing to get what they want." Fear gripped Marcus again, tightening around his chest. "What do you want from me?" "I want to help you harness that power," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But first, you must learn to embrace your new reality. The transformation is only the beginning. You need training, guidance to navigate this new world." Suddenly, the room shuddered, the walls vibrating as if a storm were brewing outside. Marcus felt the energy crackle in the air, a foreboding sign that danger was imminent. The alien woman's expression shifted from allure to urgency. "We don't have much time. They've found us." Before he could respond, the door burst open, and a group of shadowy figures flooded into the room. Their presence was suffocating, cloaked in darkness. Their eyes glinting like shards of glass in the low light. Marcus instinctively moved to protect himself, but he felt the surge of power within him stir, almost alive. The alien woman stood tall, her posture unwavering. "Stay behind me, Marcus," she commanded, her voice a low growl. "Let me show you what you're capable of." As the figures advanced, Marcus felt a whirlwind of energy spiral through him, fueled by fear and determination. It began to manifest, a force that thrummed in his veins, igniting his senses. He focused, calling on that primal energy he had felt earlier. To his astonishment, a flicker of light surged from his fingertips, illuminating the dim room. "Now!" the woman shouted. And without thinking, Marcus unleashed the energy. A wave of bright light erupted from him, pushing back the advancing figures, illuminating their faces twisted in shock and anger. the power coursing through him felt exhilarating, intoxicating. He was no longer just a passive participant in this conflict, he was a force to be reckoned with. "You can do this, Marcus," she encouraged, her voice ringing with approval. "Channel your strength. Fight back." With renewed determination, he focused again, drawing from the energy within him. The shadows recoiled, but the figures quickly regrouped, their forms shifting and blending into the darkness as they sought to overwhelm him. But this time, Marcus was ready. He pushed forward, channeling the energy into a blast of light that rippled through the air, sending the shadows scattering. The alien woman fought beside him, her movements fluid and fierce. Together, they were a whirlwind of power, light clashing against darkness. In that moment, something within Marcus clicked, a connection to the primal force he had resisted. He was not just human anymore, he was something more. As they fought, he caught glimpses of the figures' true forms, twisted creatures that seemed to blur the lines between nightmare and reality. They lunged at him, but with each strike, he felt his confidence grow. He was beginning to understand the power that flowed through him. The potential that she had spoken of, "Keep going," she urged, her voice a beacon in the chaos. "You're awakening." With a final surge of energy, Marcus unleashed a blinding wave of light, engulfing the room. The shadows screamed, their forms dissolving into the ether as the brilliance consumed them. When the light faded, he found himself standing amidst the remnants of the confrontation, panting heavily, his heart racing, but alive, more alive than he had ever felt. "Do you see now?" the alien woman said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You are not just a pawn in this game. You are a player, a force of nature. Together, we can change everything." Marcus looked at her, a mixture of awe and fear in his heart. "What comes next?" he asked, his voice steadying as the adrenaline began to wane. She smiled, her expression fierce and determined. "Now, we train. We prepare for the battles ahead. You are destined for greatness, Marcus. Embrace it." As he nodded, a sense of purpose filled him. He was no longer just a victim of circumstance, he was on the brink of something extraordinary. Together, they would face whatever challenges awaited them, and Marcus was ready to uncover the truth about himself, and the destiny that had chosen him.